Good morning, everyone. I am so excited to be joined here today by Wendy Crosina, who is the Director of Forest Sustainability at Weyerhaeuser Canadian Timberlands. How are you this morning, Wendy?
I'm just fantastic. Thanks for asking.
That's awesome. I am so glad to have you here. You just recently won the Women in Forestry Award at the Forest Products Association of Canada. How was that?
You know, it was, it's always nice to get an award, right? It's always nice to get recognition. But as I said, when I accepted the award, you know, any success that I've achieved is due in large part, you know, like folks like yourself, associations, my colleagues at Weyerhaeuser, colleagues in the forestry community. You know, so again, it's nice to get the recognition, but it does take a village, right? So, yeah.
Well, I have to say, massive congratulations to you. It is so well deserved. Everybody in this room knows, you know, Wendy Crosina and the great work that you've been doing in forestry for the last, you know, many years. It's been incredible. What are some of the moments in your career that you're the most proud of?
Well, awards like this are nice. You know, again, you get that recognition, which is not necessary, but gosh, you know, there's so many different things that I've worked on and so many different people that I've worked with that it would be really hard to pick one. You know, we work closely with, you know, government folks, and some of those files are difficult, and it always feels really good when you come out the other end and you found some good common space and some good solutions. So those kind of things always feel pretty good, and there's been a few of those over my career. So I think so.
I think so.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. My boss says that some of these things are good, so I have to believe him. So yeah.
That is so awesome. And so in your role as Director of Forest Sustainability, what are some of the kind of big files that you get to work in?
Yeah, good question. So in our Weyerhaeuser world, we have, as you're aware, we've got our head office is in Seattle, Washington, and we have lots of private land holdings in the U.S., and then we have lands under Crown tenure here in Canada. So we operate in 4 provinces. So we operate in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario. And we have a whole corporate body within Weyerhaeuser that deals with sort of sustainability at the corporate level. And then each one of those operations in the U.S. have their own folks, if you will. So in Canada, as we were talking a little bit offline, I'm kind of it for
that's amazing.
All things, you know, wildlife related, wildlife biology, sustainability, biodiversity, environmental issues. I've also got the file on Indigenous relations, which is very appropriate for today because it is September 30th, Orange Shirt Day. And I also work on greenhouse gas, climate, and carbon issues for Weyerhaeuser in Canada.
Wow, that is many, many files. I don't even know where to dig in there first. But you mentioned biology, and so correct me if I'm wrong, but you have a background as a biologist, is that right?
So I have a foot in both camps. So I'm a registered professional forester.
Okay.
And I am a registered professional biologist.
Wow.
Yeah.
My goodness. So what was first for you?
It's interesting. I was chatting at the table this morning. We were having breakfast with some folks, and the gentleman that was there, he was talking about, do you know JP Gladue? He's going to speak later this morning.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to that.
He's fantastic. I really enjoy working with him. Anyway, he was telling me that when he first started out, he wanted to be a conservation officer. And so I said, when I first started out, so I grew up in a family, northern BC, small community, background in logging, like my family, you know, they were all in the logging business. And I thought, okay, I want to do something with trees, right?
Yeah.
But I also want to do something with wildlife. And I went to university and I got my degree in wildlife biology, wildlife management. I came out of there, and at that time, the jobs were pretty limited for that type of degree. And I think I could have been a park ranger or a conservation officer, and neither one of those things appealed to me for a number of reasons. Not that they're bad jobs. And so I went back to school and got my forestry degree. And then I went and got my master's in forestry, and so now I sort of have a foot in both camps.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So, you know, of course, wildlife is a really big focus for your role. Something that we hear a lot about in this sector is a multi-species approach. Can you talk about what that means and why that's important?
Well, you know, it's really important. And if I may, can I use, I almost hate to bring it up, but can I use caribou as an example?
Yeah.
Am I okay
By
with
all means.
Okay.
This is something that you are, you know, working very, very closely to. So I would love to explore that with you.
So on the caribou file, so I think we've, in the past, and I hope we're shifting away from this, we were developing what I would call caribou-centric management plans.
Yeah.
So from a forestry perspective and a forest management planning perspective, as you're aware, when we do a forest management plan as a company for a particular tenure, there's multiple values, right?
Yeah.
So there's watershed values, there's barred owl, there are riparian values,
For sure.
fish values, and when you start to plan for just one particular species, which I think had swung towards with caribou, you are assuming that what's good for caribou is good for all those other values, and that's not always true, right? So if I could give you an example, and I may get challenged on this, and that's okay. It makes for good conversation.
For sure.
So in Grand Prairie, in our Grand Prairie tenure, Weyerhaeuser Grand Prairie tenure, we have caribou, which are, on the threatened, endangered list.
Yeah.
Then we have grizzly bear as another threatened species.
Yeah.
And so when you look at what grizzly bears need, they need young cereal stage forest, but they also need some older complex forest. But for the most part, for feeding, they need the younger forest. They like to be out in cut blocks or open areas, and then they go to the mature forest matrix, for cover and when they rest.
A good mix.
A good mix. Caribou are not, they don't adapt well to young cereal forest, and they would prefer older, more complex forests so that they can sort of separate themselves spatially from predators. So you're looking at these two animals that have some very different needs, and assuming that what's good for one is also good for the other is probably not correct, and it's probably inappropriate. So we swing too far. So when you start thinking about multi-values and multi-species, what you're trying to do is you're trying to make sure that, similar to maybe a smorgasbord, if I could use that as an analogy, there's something for everybody, right? As opposed to just the vegetarians or just the meat eaters. Does that make sense?
I agree. Yeah,
Okay.
I think that makes a ton of sense. It's important to meet the needs or to do our best to meet the needs of, many instead of just one, because that can really come to the detriment of one or multiple different species or multiple different values for sure.
Exactly. And so some folks, I have to be careful here, but refer to caribou as an umbrella species, which means that if that animal is taken care of, it cascades down, right? So it's an umbrella. It sort of covers off other species. I mean, that's a pretty crude definition, but that sort of gets you there. And they're really not, because they do specialize in certain types of forest, certain age groups, and so in order for it to be a true umbrella species, it has to be able to have more species under the umbrella, for lack of a better term. So.
And so something that we see a lot of the times when it's coming to, conversations about habitat for wildlife and so caribou, are for sure in more of those mature forest areas. Also, sometimes the conversation of risk mitigation comes up. And I mean, we're in Jasper right now where we've seen, some recent wildfires lately. And, that's something else to think about, right? I mean, you're working in that space as well.
Yeah, no, very good point. So caribou like older forests, and for a number of reasons. And maybe just as a quick aside, can I?
Yeah.
So lots of folks think that caribou like older forests because of lichen, which they do. I mean, lichen provides them with food throughout the winter, but it's not very nutritious.
Okay.
And they have to eat a lot of it. What they eat outside of lichen. So we did a research study on this a number of years ago, and we've also supported research across Canada on this, but on nutrition for caribou. They really like things like mushrooms.
Oh, interesting.
So they love mushrooms.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, if you go on YouTube, there's a little video, if you hit caribou and mushrooms or something. We were part of a project where they put a camera on a caribou, and then they sort of let it roam through an enclosure, a big enclosure, and you can see the caribou is they're beetling through the bush at pretty top speed, and they find a mushroom and they eat the mushroom, and then they move on and they find another mushroom, and everything else is it's like candy for them, right? Highly nutritious. Anyway, so from a forest management and forest health and forest risk perspective, you've got old forest, but if you let it get too old and you don't manage it appropriately, you get more over mature forest than is natural in a system.
Okay.
And you increase your risk of fire.
Yeah.
Increase your risk of disease. And we're seeing that, in Jasper as a good example.
I mean, we're here. It's very topical. Everyone's been kind of, trying to figure out what was going to happen with that fire this week.
Well, and part of, mountain pine beetle. So beetle kill for over mature forests, more susceptible. And so then you get a lot of dead and dying trees, you get a lot of over mature trees, you get a lot of fire fuel, and then you increase your risk. So
yeah, absolutely. And so pine beetle, something that we're seeing a lot of right here in Alberta, and of course, since you're working, Canada wide, you've seen tons of that in BC. I want to come back to, has there been anything particularly surprising for you working in all of these different provinces from a forestry perspective? I mean, certainly some similarities, but of course differences as well.
It's there are so many differences on so many different levels.
It's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
It is not. And that's not a bad thing, right? Because the forests are different, the areas are different, the regions are different, and the approach is different, and that's okay. Ultimately, the main goal from a forest management perspective is to ensure that there are forests there into perpetuity, right? People, I think, some folks have this impression that, as a forest harvesting company, we go out and we harvest every stick, and then we move on to the next piece of forest. And, that is just not true. We have people in each of our operational sites that spend their lives trying to ensure that we have timber into perpetuity, because why would we, as a forest products company, why wouldn't we want that?
Yeah,
right? Like
absolutely.
We want that so that, selfishly, we want that so that we have something to harvest into the future. But, we also want to support and encourage or facilitate all those other values that we talked about earlier. Right? So,
like we talk about, sustainability from an economic perspective, which is, of course, critical to the viability of our business as a forestry sector. We can't continue to operate if we don't have healthy forests to continue to manage. The other side of it that I think is really important to talk about, and you touched on this, Wendy, and it's something that I think, not everyone has a good understanding of, is, the folks that work in their sector, they, sleep, they work, they recreate in the forest every single day. And so there's certainly an element of passion to it, and never mind the economic stuff, which is, I don't want to forget about that because it is really, really important. But, it's just as important for the folks in our sector that they have these recreational opportunities, that they can enjoy the forest in the future, that their children and their grandchildren are going to have these forest resources to depend on.
Well, and if you talk to any of the folks, I would say in our company, in companies across the industry, they all have a passion for the forest. There's a reason that they're foresters. There's a reason that they've gravitated towards this as a career. So, it's not because they want to go out and simply cut a tree. Like that's just so far away from most of all of the folks that I talk to. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think that passion is so clear in the sector. It's apparent, having this conversation with you. What is something that you love most about your job? Tough question.
Tough question. It's tough to pick one. So I get to, because I work across multiple jurisdictions, and within those jurisdictions with different groups, different companies, different organizations, different governments, I get to meet a lot of people.
Yeah.
And again, believe it or not, I'm not always a huge people person. I'm like,
Wendy.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. It's not that I dislike people. It's just that I'm not, like, some folks are extroverts, right? Like I would classify you as a little bit of an extrovert.
Perhaps a little.
Just a little, which is not a bad thing. Everybody's different, right? So I always like to kind of, I really enjoy the interaction with folks. Some days more than others. I like the challenges. I like being able to address complex issues and come to the table with solutions and work with folks, and I mentioned it earlier, come to a place where we can all kind of walk away and say, yeah, we're pretty happy with the solution. Like, I like that kind of work. It's challenging, it's gratifying, and it's sometimes fun, working with people. Sometimes, everybody has bad days, and everybody has days where they're kind of going, wow, why did I get into this? This is not very smart. But for the most part, those are the good things.
Yeah, really rewarding for sure to come to those solutions.
Yeah, I mean, I get to work with people like you, right? And I get to do stuff like this. I think this is a good thing. So.
Right? It's fun. I told you it would be fun.
Okay, well, yeah, you keep saying that, and keep trying to convince me. Here we go.
It's interesting, you mentioned how you feel like you're a little bit more of an introvert. And I think that's something we see a lot in this sector, is that, the folks that want to be out there working in the bush every day, I think part of the appeal is that they're in the bush working alone all day. And I think we see that as part of the challenge with not a lot of people having a good understanding of our sector, because the people that are doing the good work in our sector, they're not really talking about what they're doing, right? So I guess, what do you think are some good ways that we can continue to talk about what we're doing and get those messages out? Because they are so important.
Well, it's a very good point. I mean, I entered this profession or looked at this as a career. When I first started out, I was looking at wildlife biology, didn't want to be a forest ranger. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. It just didn't appeal to me.
For sure.
And then I got a forestry degree, and I'm thinking, okay, what can I do with that? Oh, I like trees. I like being outside. I like, the forest. I like that notion of sustainability and perpetuity. But right now, I was joking about this at breakfast this morning again. I don't actually think I've been out in the forest and seen a tree as part of my job for I just don't get to do that anymore, right? Because you spend your time talking to people and trying to, as you just alluded to, communicate to folks some of the good things about the sector and some of the good things about what we do. So it's interesting, and it's, I'm thinking about the Love Alberta Forest
the campaign.
I mean, that's a fantastic way to communicate some of the values that we've been talking about and some of the benefits of sustainable forest management, some of the good things, and communicate to people, share with people, I guess, some of the passion and some of the good work that folks do in the industry that don't have the opportunity to or are not comfortable talking about it. So the Love Alberta's Forest campaign, I think that's fantastic. I think it's great. It's interactive. It's it's short sound bites. That seems to be what we operate in these days. And it's got some really good information. So I think things like that are highly appropriate, and having folks like yourself and others in the industry as ambassadors and being able to talk with passion and with knowledge about what we do. And I think that catches people's attention, and I think it resonates.
Yeah. Wendy, this has been so fabulous. It's been fun for me, for sure. Is there anything else that you want to chat about before we wrap up?
Maybe just touch on, if you don't mind, just thinking about the award that I got with FPAC again, not because I want to bring the award up again, but because I think it's important in a couple of ways. One, it speaks to the diversity and inclusivity of the forest sector. We talk a lot these days about DE&I, so diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you.
Yeah. It's early.
It's very early. and I think forestry, I was looking around the room last night as we were chatting at dinner at all the tables there, and good mix of male to female, good mix to young and old. We had some of the students from NATE and U of A there, and knowing that there's folks coming up. And I can't remember what the ratio there was, but I think there was 4 female students and 2 male that we had.
It was a good mix for sure. It was great to see that.
Well, and 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it probably would have been 5-1 in favor of males, right? So I just wanted to touch on that because I think our sector, our industry, and our companies have led the way on that across Canada from an industry perspective, not just forestry. And I've been blessed to work in a company that supports that and really sort of in a meaningful way and proves that by putting women, not people that not just for the sake of putting women and diversity candidates in roles, but because they've earned it and they get the support within my company, Weyerhaeuser, and within the industry. So I just wanted to touch on that because we didn't talk about that right now.
No, I'm so glad that you brought that up, Wendy. I think it's a really great point. And we do see a lot of meaningful inclusion in our sector. And I think, I'm so glad that you were recognized with that award because you were a very prominent woman in our sector. You've done a lot of great work in forestry, and I think, so well deserved. So again, congratulations.
Well, thank you. And I didn't bring it up at the end because I wanted to get the kudos, right? Like I just wanted to make sure because we didn't touch on that. And I think that's an important point. And right. I'm seeing that change in our sector over the last 10 to 15 years, and I think it's a good change.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Wendy.
Thank you.
This was amazing.
I appreciate it. Thanks.